Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of High Energy Girl. And today's awesome guest is Christine DeLozier, who is a acupuncturist, herbalist, and an author of the book Diet for Great Sex. That is right. I absolutely had a blast talking with Christine, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So let's go and say hello. Hey everyone, welcome to High Energy Girl, a podcast helping women to age stronger because it is never too late to get fit, be strong, and feel sexy. I'm your host, Tracy Gluhite, health coach and personal trainer and founder of highenergygirl.com. Each week, we will either have a guest interview, which will provide you encouragement or an actionable tip to help you age stronger, or I will do a solo episode. Please also join our awesome Facebook group called High Energy Girls, and I'm looking forward to see you on the inside of that group and hope you enjoy today's show. Give a woman a fish, feed her for a day. Teach a woman to fish, feed her for a lifetime. Teach a woman to fish, end world hunger. Have you ever wanted to help people improve their health journey? Have you thought about coaching people with a keto lifestyle? Would you like to become an integrative health coach? Well, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN as we call it, is the largest nutrition school in the country. And in 2011, I graduated from their program and became a health coach. It was completely awesome. We learned over 100 different dietary theories and talk about craziness and confusion. My wish for you is that we can lock arms and create a tribe of health coaches all around the country, all around the world to spread the keto message. If this resonates with you and you would like to look into this option deeper, please go to my blog at highenergygirl.com and click on the link to the right of the homepage. Here you can grab the curriculum guide and see if it inspires you. Since I care so much about my listeners, I negotiated the very best tuition rate for you at IIN. Either you can contact them directly and give them my name, or I will introduce you to a counselor so you can decide if this is a good fit for you and your career goals. Let me know how I can support you in this coaching career opportunity. Hey, Christine, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, how could I not? I'm super excited about your book and all. So for the listeners that don't know you yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Christine DeLozier. I am the author of the book Diet for Great Sex, Food for Male and Female Sexual Health. I'm a licensed acupuncturist in private practice, and I specialize in sexual health.
Perfect. And where are you located?
I'm in Rochester, New York.
Oh, okay. Cold up there, huh?
Oh, yes. Lots of ice, snow, sleet, all that's going on right now. Time for Aruba,
That can't help with a good sex life. I'm just saying.
or it could, if you're escaping the cold and you want to cuddle up in bed all the time and retreat, in the warmth of another's arms. Yeah,
Okay. That's a good point. So, how did you get to where you are now? How did you become this expert in great sex?
Well, okay, so I guess it's kind of all culminated in this because when I was an undergraduate, I trained to be a research scientist. So I, kind of dove into the whole science end of things. And, as an acupuncturist, I was just treating back pain and neck pain, things like that most of us treat. But then I had a patient come in and he asked if I could do anything to help him have stronger erections. So I said, sure, let's give it a whirl. And he had such good results. And then I ended up having several patients back to back that had great results. So I decided to specialize in it because it was something that really brought a lot of joy to people's relationships and helped them in their with intimacy. And it was something that offered a lot of value because it's difficult to treat with, whether you're talking about Western medicine, pharmaceuticals, sexual health is something that's difficult to address in general. And the fact that we were getting really good results was promising. Where I brought the nutrition end of things into it, I mean, I did study Chinese dietary therapy. I also studied, modern nutrition and got a certificate in holistic nutrition. But mostly I drew on my history as a research scientist. I just looked at the literature, and I looked at what kind of evidence there was to show this relationship. So that's how I made it here. I wanted to have a tool for my patients, because I was always, talking in their ear about, what are you eating? What should you be eating? How is this, how can we support your sexual health goals? And so having that book and, having it all in one place was, it was a challenge, and it was something that, I really wanted to do. I hadn't seen it out there.
So now you started off saying that you were working with men. And then when did you involve or evolve into taking both men and women? Let's start with that one.
As soon as the first patient came into me, saying, "Hey, I really want to, can you help have an easier time orgasming?" I mean, that's probably the number one complaint that it's number one or number two. The two biggest complaints I have among my female patients who come in is, can you help me to have a better libido, stronger libido? And can you help to have easier, stronger orgasms? Because there's this, gap in, for men, it tends to be quite easy. For women, it can be a lot trickier.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you get older.
Yeah, exactly. When we think about great sex, we usually think about it as a psychological phenomenon. We have the right person, the right situation, the right ambiance. But physiologically, great sex is when our nerves are firing strong, rapid impulses to and from our genitals. It's when our blood vessels are delivering optimal blood flow, and it's when our sex hormones are balanced. And the nerve part is particularly relevant to women and orgasm, because the stronger those signals of pleasure fire, the better our arousal response, the better and easier orgasm we have. So focusing on that with diet and with other strategies is, kind of key for my female patients.
Well, considering that most of the people listening to the show are not in Rochester, New York, the book is very relevant, right?
Yeah.
So when you do that acupuncture, like, let's just pretend that somebody lives kind of close by and they want to come up to your clinic for the acupuncture part of it. How many treatments either a male or a female need to feel their desired result approximately, would you guess?
I would say patients tend to notice some changes within one treatment. Not always. I tell patients, give it a few treatments to make any kind of determination if you think this is helping or if it's not helping, because, it's not for everybody. I have some patients who get kind of miraculous results, and I have other patients who don't get any results. I mean, but I would say the majority of patients who come to me for sexual health issues, they notice a change after one treatment. It's not 100%, where they want to be, but they may notice increased arousal. They may notice more erections in the morning, for example. They may notice it took them less time to orgasm, that sort of thing. Because when you bring blood flow, all of that other stuff, it just tends to help everything. It may not completely fix it right away, but it's a start.
Cool. I love the whole, like, I am a Reiki master, so I've studied like the energetic stuff, and most people think it's kind of woo-woo, but they all believe in acupuncture, even though it's, it's like they're cousins or something. So let's talk about food. I really want to dive into, the whole book. Like, where does it start? Like, what can you share about it?
Well, we can talk a little bit about the relationship between food and all of these, dimensions of great sex that we talked about. We can kind of use a case, one case in point, leafy greens, because it's one of the absolute best things we can eat for sex. And the reason is it affects this entire trifecta of great sex. It strengthens nerve conduction. It improves the delivery of blood to the genitals, and it helps balance sex hormones. So, for example, it's loaded with micronutrients, which in research were shown to reduce cortisol levels. And the reason this is relevant is, there's two reasons this is relevant. One of them is that when we're stressed out, we don't want to have sex. But the other thing that happens when we're stressed out and have high levels of the stress hormone cortisol is that testosterone drops. And that's important for male and female libido and sexual health. We want to maintain optimal levels of testosterone. And we all know that that's important for male sexual health. But even, some women have gone to their doctors to get testosterone to improve their libido, because it is something that we need. The second thing is leafy greens are one of the, hands down, one of the best things you can eat for your cardiovascular system, because they improve the elasticity of blood vessels. They help remove deposits in things that stiffen blood vessels and reduce blood flow. One of the kind of cruel jokes of Mother Nature is that the arteries leading to the clitoris and the penis are among the smallest in the body. And so any signs of plaque accumulation, those are the first ones to get blocked. Long before you have any kind of heart disease symptoms, sexual health is something that will be noticed first. And then thirdly, we've talked about, and the third thing that leafy greens do is they strengthen nerve conduction. So there are all sorts of studies showing that antioxidants, for example, will strengthen nerve conduction. It'll strengthen that signal that leads to and from the genitals. So the reason for that is because most of the damage to those nerves that occurs as we get older is from oxidative stress. So, and in particular, if you take a more obvious case of that, like type 2 diabetes, type 2 diabetes is notorious for causing slow nerve conduction and hence sexual dissatisfaction, reduced erectile strength, less blood flow, less clitoral sensitivity, for example. And so when they gave type 2 diabetics antioxidant supplementation, they had two results. One was they actually measured how long it takes for nerves to fire from one place to the next, and they measure how quickly and how strongly those impulses are. So that improves with antioxidant supplementation, and even sexual health reports improve too. So sexual satisfaction, how orgasm strength and ease of orgasms, all those things improve with antioxidant supplementation because of their effect on nerves. And that's just with one food. That's just leafy greens that we're talking about. There's all sorts of foods that have benefit to sexual health.
So what are your favorite forms of leafy greens?
I like spinach. I mean, not because it's better than all the others, but it is more studied than all the others. Most of the research on the health benefits of leafy greens focus on things like spinach and kale. So those are good choices. We know that they work. Different leafy greens have different flavor profiles. They have different vitamin and mineral profiles, but those are safe bets. I like leafy greens like romaine and arugula. All of them have really good nutrients to offer for sex.
Okay, cool. You know what I find interesting is, so I believe that the leafy greens are high in vitamin K2, and like people on blood thinners, I could be getting this wrong, but this is what I think, that people with blood thinners aren't supposed to be having a lot of leafy greens because of they're not supposed to, it affects them or something. So, but I know that K2 helps get calcium deposits out of your arteries and into your bones. So that would make sense with what you just said, is that the arteries going to the genitalia are small. And so the K2 would help. So that's from the leafy greens. You follow that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are other nutrients in leafy greens that do the same thing too. So for example, just potassium. I mean, humans used to take in about 10 times as much potassium in our diets as sodium. Now it's just the opposite because we have so many processed foods. And what this does is it encourages calcification of those blood vessels. But potassium offsets that calcification and removes some of those calcium deposits, and also just again does all of those wonderful things to blood vessels, like helps repair the blood vessel wall and helps make the blood vessels more elastic.
So what is your favorite form of potassium? Because everybody thinks it's bananas.
Yeah, the thing about it is you really have to make a concerted effort to get enough potassium. There's not a lot of it in a lot of foods. It's like a short list of anything that has more than 20%. Bananas on the list, yes. Leafy greens are on the list. Potato with the skin on it, about 40% of the potassium is in the skin. Yams with the skins on them, squash, oranges, mango, those are good choices. If you're doing a low carb diet, anybody who's doing a low carb diet has to be really mindful of their potassium, because most of the good sources of it are higher in carbs. So you would have to get extra leafy greens. Avocado has it, but most of the other ones on the list have a lot of carbs in them.
Here's a secret for you. Okay, so when somebody eats a potato, well, my favorite part of a potato is the skin. Okay. You load up it with all the good stuff. So I tell my clients, because I coach them all on low carb eating, is scoop out the starchy stuff and then fill the skin with, butter, sour cream, whatever, and then eat the skin. So then that would work as a source of potassium.
Yeah, that would be a really good source of potassium. And, and again, the leafy greens, they're a great source of potassium, and we should be eating a lot of them, because, humans are designed to be eating a lot of leafy greens anyways, no matter what diet you're following, whether it's low carb, whether it's plant-based, we all should be doing that. If we kind of have all these different ideas about what a good diet looks like, from high carb, low fat to high fat, low carb to, everything comes in a box to nothing comes in a box. And, but if we want to get some guidance, because we don't seem to know the answer to this, despite all the research, if we look at other primates, our closest genetically cousins are chimpanzees, but all primates eat loads and loads of leaves. They spend a good portion of their day eating leaves and berries and things like that. And in doing so, they get many times the amount of things like potassium, for example, as modern humans, many times the amount of fiber, many times the amount of magnesium, which again reduces cortisol levels. It helps us to deal with stress better and to have better sex.
Yeah. So besides food, okay, so it sounds like, leafy greens are it. So you would love my garden. I have a massive garden and we have like all the good stuff. Let me ask you a question about that. Okay. So there is some talk, and I don't know the answer to this, but I've heard that for spinach and kale, you really need to cook them. And for some reason, like eating them raw isn't supposed to be very good. Do you know about that?
Well, there are some nutrients in them. In broccoli is kind of a similar thing. Some nutrients are actually more absorbable in the steamed form. Other nutrients are, but your total nutrients are more abundant in the raw form. So if you boil, the more you boil something, the more the vitamins and minerals go into the water that you're boiling it into. So, you can have it both ways. But in general, I recommend raw for spinach and leafy greens. And then for things like broccoli, I recommend maybe you steam it sometimes and have it that way and eat some raw as well.
I like it oven roasted.
Oh yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah, I've had that.
There's this chef, her name's Allison Roman. She lives in New York, in Brooklyn. And my son bought me her cookbook. And the other night I barbecued, because I was using her cookbook, barbecued kale and broccoli together with all these spices and stuff on it. It was really crazily interesting and, different, but delicious.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, any way you can get lots of fresh, did you say there were mushrooms in there?
No,
what was it? It was kale and
broccoli.
Oh, and broccoli. Okay, yeah. So yeah, throw some mushrooms in there and you've got a really powerhouse of antioxidants working for you.
Yeah, I love mushrooms. High in vitamin D. Super good. We actually live like where I live, Morgan Hill, California is like the mushroom capital of the world. So,
Oh my goodness, I love mushrooms. I can't say enough about them. In fact, I wrote a whole chapter about them in my book. Mushrooms are so cool with how many antioxidants they have. Yes, but there's so much more that they have to offer. The coolest thing about mushrooms, from my experience in looking at the research, is their effect on the human microbiome. So, we're learning more and more just about how important our microbiome and in this delicate balance of microbes that exist in our digestive tract and elsewhere on the body. And we're talking about, this microbiome affects not only digestive issues, it affects sex in many different ways. It affects your risk of cardiovascular disease. It affects weight. It affects all these different things. And they've done a lot of studies on it. So for example, in one study, they basically gave one group of patients that had a high BMI. They gave them reishi supplementation, and these patients lost weight, or these subjects lost weight. Then they did a transplant. They did a fecal transplant on the feces of that group, transferred it to a new group of subjects who had a high BMI, and those subjects also lost weight. So they didn't even eat the reishi mushrooms. There's a whole lot of research showing that each of these different mushroom species has a different effect on different populations of microbial species, but they all tend to kind of move it into benefit the good bacteria and reduce the pathogenic kind of bad bacterial populations. So even your plain white button mushroom was shown in research to improve the microbial diversity in the digestive tract and offer benefit. It serves as like a prebiotic as well to this good bacteria growing in there.
that's interesting. I didn't know that. So which mushroom did you say helped the people that were trying to lose the weight?
Reishi, that particular study was on reishi mushrooms.
Interesting. I go hiking in this beautiful forest. It's like a riparian, just beautiful. And I always run into all these wild mushrooms, and I'm usually with my kids, and I'm like, oh, I gotta pick all these. They're like, Mom, you're gonna freaking kill yourself. Knock it off.
Yeah, you got to know a thing or two. There's certain ones that are, pretty safe bets, but yeah, some of the wackier ones. Some of the fun ones are like chicken of the woods. That's pretty easy to identify, or oyster mushrooms, that sort of thing are nice to find on your walk.
Yeah, they're just so amazingly beautiful. I just take pictures of them. So what does your diet look like, Christine? What is your specific nutrition regime?
Well, mine basically looks like eating a whole lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, trying to get in. So what I advise for my patients, for example, is if you want to start out simple, maybe you start with one meal, start out with lunch. So that, every patient that you see, just like, if you're doing coaching, you understand that every patient is at a different baseline level, when they come in. So if they want to make small changes, I say start with lunch. So what I eat for lunch is a big, huge leafy green salad with a baked yam or a baked potato or squash, So in that one meal, you're getting about 50% of your daily potassium. You're getting also a hefty dose of a lot of those other minerals that are important for great sex. You get some vitamin C from the potato. You get you get all sorts of, you get the cruciferous vegetables have nutrients which reduce inflammation. And of course, inflammation is a big factor that kind of inhibits great sex, if you will. So yeah, so that one meal, you're packing a huge punch. Then for my dinner, I try to get in fish several times a week. and I try to stick with some of the varieties that have lots of omega-3s and lower, amounts of mercury. So like wild salmon, for example, I do. Omega-3s are one of those things that are essential in that dopamine pathway. So again, what is an orgasm? An orgasm is, it's stimulation of that dopamine pathway. And if you want proper, execution of that process, then you have to have omega-3s as part of that. Your brain is a good portion of the fats in your brain are omega, that omega-3 variety, and your body can't produce them. You have to take them in food. So we're talking about fish, or we're talking about anybody who's doing plant-based can do things like walnuts or chia seeds, that sort of thing. But so some kind of fish oftentimes. But it's not that you can't eat, beef or anything like that. I mean, beef is a really great bioavailable source of zinc, which is really a really huge player in sexual health. And whereas, if you're doing something like plant-based, you just have to make sure that you prepare your legumes and grains a certain way. So most of the zinc in legumes and grains is attached to what we call phytates, which renders it not bioavailable. So, but that's why people throughout history have soaked or sprouted grains and legumes, because then it gets rid of those phytates and it renders the zinc and other nutrients more bioavailable. But anyway, so for dinner, I have, some kind of protein, try to incorporate fish at least a few times a week, and a starch like a potato, yam, squash, or peas, and then a vegetable, like a steamed vegetable like broccoli or something like that. So and then breakfast is usually pretty simple. It's like berries and nuts, maybe, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, we have walnut trees, so I eat lots of walnuts.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, we have like 7, so we have tons of walnuts. So getting back to the omega-3s fish. So besides salmon, what other foods do you recommend?
Oh, for omega-3s specifically? Yeah, again, different nuts have some omega-3s to offer. If you don't eat fish and you don't eat nuts, then I would say take a supplement, like an EPA DHA supplement, like an algae based is good. But those are the big foods, honestly. Omega-3s, I mean, most fats have some omega-3, 6, 9. It's just the ratio that is different in each of the different ones. If you really have to, though, fish is the big one, the ratio of omega-3, 6, 3 to 6 to 9. And something like beef is definitely not, it's not going to give you enough of the omega-3s. Chicken, the same. You really have to incorporate fish. And if you're not doing fish, if you're not, if you don't eat it, then do nuts, walnuts. All of the other nuts don't have a great omega-3 profile. So,
but what other fish? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you were saying what other fish? Oh, yeah. I see. Okay. I thought you said what other foods. What other fish? Okay. So, well, again, I prefer salmon because it has a high omega-3 and not as much mercury compared to something like mackerel. Something like cod does have a good amount of omega-3, but it's much, much less than something like salmon. The mercury profile of something like cod is decent, but it doesn't offer anywhere near the amount of omega-3s as salmon. You can do like a halibut does have a good omega-3 profile. Let me see, bass, I believe, does as well. Tuna does, but sometimes they have now tuna cans that are, every single one is tested for mercury and it's way below the standard. So if you get that specific kind of canned tuna, you can do tuna. Tuna is one of the bigger carriers of mercury, though, so it's one of the ones that has to kind of be on the radar to either avoid it or make sure it's one of those mercury safe kind of things.
Yeah, I think that's the brand Wild Planet that's really good about keeping it low mercury. And you can get that
Yeah.
anywhere, Costco or um a friend of mine actually got mercury toxicity from eating too much tuna, and she had to do the whole chelation therapy thing. She's pretty sick.
Yeah, that I actually saw a patient with that as well. She had gone to a pescatarian diet, which in general I say is good. A pescatarian diet you know, isn't a bad idea. But yeah, she did have mercury toxicity, and she started avoiding fish, and her mercury levels went down. She didn't do a chelation therapy. There are actually some foods though. I have them outlined in my book because it's not just mercury when we eat fish. We are exposed to tons of toxins in our environment that cause us to absorb toxic heavy metals. And actually, the pharmaceutical chelators were not as effective in research as foods, yeah, as certain foods were, interestingly enough. Yeah. So,
Better.
yeah, different metals had research showing different foods had more of an affinity for them. But remember we talked about zinc. Zinc is a big one for that because so your body, if I can explain this and get off on a little bit of a tangent, your body produces produces something that's called metallothioneins. It's a protein that helps you to deal with heavy metal ingestion. And we're not just talking about, if you live next to a dump or something like that. We're talking about the studies that are out there show that all of us are exposed to things like cadmium in the food we eat, in the air we breathe, and not at small levels that are insignificant. We're talking about at levels that do have the capability to shift our hormonal balance and to cause neurological damage. The science is pretty clear on this. I mean, there's definitely enough evidence to show that very clearly, and to cause endocrine changes as well. So, but for example, the higher our calcium and magnesium, according to research, the less of these toxins our body will absorb when we're exposed to them. But zinc in particular helps our body. It actually induces the production of those metallothioneins, which is that protein that our body produces naturally to help us deal with those. Does that make sense?
So yeah, well, I take about 50 milligrams of zinc every day. So let me see if I heard you right. So basically, if you have zinc in your diet, either supplement or food, then it helps your body prevent absorption of these other heavy metals such as cadmium that we are exposed to regularly. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, well, the research that's out there shows that it induces the production of this protein in your body that will bind to them and remove them from the body.
Oh, okay.
Calcium and magnesium, the more calcium and magnesium you take in nutritionally, the less your body will absorb of these. That's other kind of research. So they all have their own little, benefit, if you will.
So I wonder, would the zinc bind to something different than the magnesium or the calcium? Would they all bind to a different type of a heavy metal exposure?
This metallothionein is known to bind to different toxic heavy metals. Something like magnesium and calcium doesn't bind to these heavy metals. What it does is it likely, I imagine, I'll have to look at the research on it, but it likely blocks the receptor sites so that they can't be filled with the heavy metals.
Okay. That makes more sense. You're really smart, and being that you went to TCM, you're a little over my head. So
sorry.
No, it's all good. I love learning from smart people like you. It's really fun.
No, thank you.
So really quick, I want to ask another question. So what amount of potassium do you recommend somebody consume each day?
Let's see. I can't remember what the RDA is for it, but it's the equivalent of about 5 bananas or or a potato, a banana, a mango. Each of those sources that I listed has about 20% per serving. of the RDA. Most of us, about 97% of Americans, according to one study, don't get enough potassium in our diets. So we could all, stand to focus on it. I mean, I could look up the actual specific numbers, but what it amounts to in food is about 5 of those things that I mentioned. One banana plus one potato plus a couple of cups of leafy greens. I mean, you can get some of that potassium piecemeal from your other foods. You could probably stand to, maybe get, 3 of those a day and then get the rest piecemeal. So for example, if you eat beef, a serving of beef has about 10% of your potassium. It's not enough. It's not enough to consider it like a supplement, but you get little pieces of it here and there.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. So you're making me want to eat more greens. Because sometimes I get a stomach ache and I take enzymes and, it's just sometimes I really get stomach aches from eating too much vegetables. And my husband will be like, babe, come on. What about fasting?
Yeah, I've got a chapter, or not a chapter, I have a section on fasting. The research is pretty supportive of it in terms of its ability to help normalize hormones and help to, so for example, one of the benefits of fasting is it helps normalize things like leptin and ghrelin, insulin, all of those hormones that then, when they're disrupted, they affect things like testosterone and estrogen.
I didn't know that. So what if okay, so I've been married almost 32 years. In 10 days, it'll be 32 years.
Congratulations.
And I know it's TMI, but we already have a good sexual relationship. Obviously, we've lasted this long. You're probably not even that old, are you?
46.
Oh, you are. You look so young. Your skin is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So what would you say that we should do to enhance our sex life?
You mean food-wise or? Yeah. Okay. So, that's what the whole book is about, honestly, is, it talks about basically the science of eating for great sex, from, so for example, a great sex diet isn't different from like a healthy diet. It's just, this book explores what those things do, to our bodies in terms of sex. A great sex diet is going to, it's going to be a reduction in overall, like your greasy, fatty foods. Certain fats are better than others. It's like your avocado is a lot better than your French fries, your fried foods, for example. So you're going to improve your fat profile. Lots and lots of fresh fruits and vegetables because of all those antioxidants in them, because of all those, the micronutrients that reduce inflammation and that encourage hormonal balance. All those antioxidants are going to be what strengthens nerve conduction, and that's going to benefit, again, pleasure directly. And it's going to include, all those nutrients we talked about, plus, more in the book. I mean, we've got omega-3s, we've got antioxidants, cruciferous is a part of it. Fasting is a something that you can do to enhance, and getting potassium rich foods, minerals, B vitamins, all those things are abundant in fresh fruits and vegetables, but there are certain things that you can, focus on. So, there are certain foods, for example, that have a benefit in the short term, not only in the long term. So there's foods that will increase blood flow, according to research, within 2 hours of eating them. If you eat 1 serving of leafy greens, so your body produces something called nitric oxide. That's what dilates blood vessels. Okay, it's the whole principle that Viagra works on. In research, after 1 serving of nitrate-rich foods, in this particular study, it was spinach, they tested salivary nitric oxide levels, and they were 8 times that of baseline. Okay, that's 1 serving of spinach. So it's not insignificant. It's not going to be like a Viagra pill, but it will definitely be, pack a punch. Other, nitrate rich foods like beets and cabbage and celery, all those things are good. Potassium rich foods have the same effect. They improved the elasticity of those blood vessels, improved arterial function within 2 hours of eating them. Polyphenols, same thing. That's things like berries, apples, stuff like that. That's a type of antioxidant that gets to work right away. And then there are certain things, for example, that will stiffen blood vessels very soon after eating them. A very high salt meal, not even very high salt, a high salt meal will stiffen blood vessels within 30 minutes. So they're measurably more stiff. That means you're getting less blood flow in the short term, if that makes sense.
Like oysters, everybody says, oh yeah, eat oysters, they'll make you horny.
Yeah. Well, you know what? 1 oyster has about 50% of your daily zinc. Just one. Yeah. So it that's probably where it gets its reputation from. That's a powerhouse of zinc. And then there are foods that will immediately dump testosterone. So you eat a sugary meal, anything that's going to spike your blood sugar will dump testosterone. It'll sharply decline testosterone. And that's not what, male or female wants for sex. So, so we have a whole toolbox of things that can, help or hinder great sex. In general, it's like the closer it is to Mother Nature, the better it often is for sex. The more packaged, processed, boxed, and preserved, usually the less, the less valuable it is for sex. And more,
you'll love this.
Dancing away.
You'll love this quote. It says, "Eat more peels and leaves and less wrappers and boxes."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that would be right up your alley. Awesome.
Yeah.
So is there any parting wisdom that you would want to encourage our listeners with?
I would just say, be kind to yourselves and be kind to your partners. And that includes being kind to our bodies and our partners' bodies.
Yeah, that's so true. I always when I have clients say, oh, I hate my body. It's like, you got to love yourself first before you'll ever make any changes for the better. So
yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
So where can the listeners get your book, Christine?
It's on Amazon, Diet for Great Sex. And I'm also on social media at Diet for Great Sex. I've got a blog, dietforgreatsex.com. So they can find me on any of those places.
Awesome. Well, I love the name. I love the premise because let's face it, oxytocin is a really important hormone. And, the better sex you have, the more you have, the higher pleasure you're going to have overall in life, and it will spill over to everybody around you. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You are a delight, and I'm sure that everybody's going to love hearing your words of wisdom.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Okay, that was super fun. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you pick up her book. For complete show notes, head on over to highenergygirl.com/show. Thank you so much for listening, and make it a great day.
This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion and I could be wrong.